There we go. We go to the AMM, which stands for Authorization Management Module. You can find this one over here at CBAM. Now you can read the URL, right? Because of the 31st of March 2025, a new section of the CBAM registry allows importers and indirect customs representatives to apply for the status of authorized CBAM declarant in the member state of establishment, which is independent from where the goods are imported, by the way. And, well, to comply with the EU carbon border adjustment mechanism, importers must obtain the CBAM authorization. You must. It's not a choice. And this authorization is essential for importing regulated goods into the EU. The module facilitates the entire process. So from the initial authorization request submitted by applicants to the consultation process between competent authorities and the Commission. In a bit, I show you what is competent authority, what are all these words which I'm using. But the first step, what you have to do is you go to this website, and over here, you have to select the applicant domain you want to access. Now, this is something you have to look up in your local country where you are applying, because in some cases, you need to click on the custom border adjustment mechanism, but in some cases, you need to click on customs. If I remember well, for example, in the Czech Republic, it really depends on the country where they put the procedure. So second step is, of course, select the country where you want to be authenticated. The third one is you have to select the type of actor. In this case, I put employee, but if you are registering as a company at that moment and not as an employee of the company, you have to choose the economic operator, or you can also be, for example, customs representative. Over here, you have to fill in your type of ID. If you're an employee, you have three options. If I remember well, if you're an economic operator, you can only fill in your EORI number. So in this authorization management module, who is involved? First of all, the applicant who is wondering if she will become a CBAM declarant. You submit an application to the competent authority, for example, in the Netherlands, that's called the NEA, to become an authorized CBAM declarant. But if you're in the application phase, you are not yet an authorized CBAM declarant. The steps which you and the authorities will take is the following. First of all, your application is being reviewed by the DTCA, which stands for Decision Taking Competent Authority. They don't have to do all the work themselves. They have other national competent authorities which are helping them. They are advising them. They are reviewing the data you are submitting. In a bit, we will talk about guarantees. We will talk about what financial data or other data you have to provide them. And the other national competent authorities receiving help, and they are providing their advice to the DTCA. Based on that, you become an authorized declarant or not. We can help you with that. We can literally, as we say, hold your hand. However, I hope that after this webinar, you can do it yourself. It is a tricky process because you don't want to fail this. If you fail it, you literally can't import anymore from next year. So I can imagine you want to have an extra pair of eyes reviewing your documents, etc. But that's for a later stage. So again, the process is the applicant submits an application, then they call that there's a process with verification, a consultation, and eventually a decision. You're declined or you are approved. However, if you're declined, you still have the right to be heard. You can almost call it like an appeal. Once you're approved, you can later on amend your authorization, because once the authority has reviewed and approved your application, you receive an official status as an authorized declarant. From there on, you're allowed to purchase, manage, surrender CBAM certificates. You're subject to the formal CBAM obligations, and your details are included in the European CBAM registry. But still, you can amend that. You can revoke it if you want to stop. You can also have them reassessed as well. You can communicate with the authorities. You might wonder, like, why would I amend it? Well, for example, you'll see in a bit that there's an example which is available in the videos of the authorities, and they are showing that certain company is amending that they are importing a 2,000 tons extra. You need to request that. Looks like I'll show you that in a bit. So here we go. This is the portal. The first thing I would, one second. The first thing I would like to recommend you is, of course, to set the language. In this case, it's English, so most of us can read what we are doing. The second is, this is the homepage. The homepage always has two notifications in the front: unanswered notifications and unread notifications. On the left side, however, there's the following homepage, CBAM TR. You can find your authorizations. That means once you're authorized, you can find your notifications. Those are messages. And you can find your submissions. That is what you have submitted to the portal. The difference between unanswered is that you didn't reply yet, and unread means that you haven't read them yet. They make a distinction. As you can see, this is the same application. We are in the process of right to be heard, meaning that it looks like it's not going that well, and they appeal it. There is a notification which is not read, and there's a notification which is the same, which is not answered yet. There are two kinds of notifications in the platform. There's simple notifications, which are informing the economic operator, the company, about new information, for example, status change or a new decision. But there's also a request for which the economic operator must provide an answer. For example, if you need to provide additional information. And as you can see here, there's a reception time, but there's also an expiry date. And usually that's 1 month. You need to make sure you reply within a month. That is the time what is usually set. Next step. If you want to see a notification, you click on this eye and the notification will open. What I personally like is that you can mark the status as read, but you can also undo that. So if you, for example, quickly check a notification, but you don't want to forget it in the future, you are going to make sure that you want to mark it, unmark it as read. So next time it will pop up again. Let me see, is there anything I wanted to mention here? Yeah, it says like it's a request. When it says yes, it means that you need to actively reply to that. You can find it. And the sender type in this case is Belgium. This is happening in Belgium. Now, if I go to the submissions list, you'll see here a list of submission. Please ignore the send time, because this is a kind of a demo from the EU, and they have sent them all in 1 day, but usually it wouldn't go that fast. There will be some time in between. As you can see, first there was a CBAM application. After that, they had to provide adjustments, and eventually they had to provide a point of view. So it's not going that well yet. But in the submission list, you can see what kind of your progress is. Here, this is what I was mentioning. If you click on this one, you can open your submission, and you can see the basic data for that. Interesting here is, for example, in the bottom, provider of point of view. The information they gave is, our company has secured a financial guarantee to cover potential environmental liabilities, meeting all regulatory standards. So it looks like that in this case, the authority said, like, look, I understand you want to start importing CBAM items, but we are not sure if you have the money to do so. In a bit, we will talk more about guarantee, but if you, for example, a company younger than 2 years, they see you as a high risk. Or if you don't have a clean track record, they see you as a high risk, or there's certain there are certain, let's say, specifics where they can classify you as high risk, and they will ask you for certain guarantees. In a bit, I'll show you which one that is, but one of them could simply be a deposit, meaning that you have to put money on a bank account. So they are sure that you will pay your CBAM costs. Now, once you go to authorizations, you can click on new application, and this is where you file your application. Please have attention for these top bars. It goes in 3 stages. You start on the left side, stakeholders details, which is kind of easy. A lot of stuff is already pre-filled in because you provided your EORI number. As you can see below, a name and address, street number, etc. is already provided. The second step is activity data details. I will go there in a bit, and then eventually the financial and operational details. Let me scroll up. Yeah. So step 1 is, of course, step 1 is if you're acting on your own behalf. The second one is if you're an indirect customs representative or not. You provide your contact details, and that is actually all there is, because the next step is already that we go to activity details. Now it gets more interesting. First of all, you have to provide your economic activity identifier. So what do you do? And what is your activity description? In this case, it is the production of iron and steel. There are many, many options. Make sure you select the right one. And next, we're going to go to here we put steel beams for construction. Next is the quantity of goods and also the measure unit. Now, when I was checking this, I was like, would I overestimate a little bit the amount of goods? Or would I maybe underestimate it a little bit? The tricky thing is that if you overestimate it, you have the chance that they will ask for higher guarantees. And liquidity-wise, it's not interesting to put a higher deposit than you should be. However, I also saw on the platform that if you somehow want to import 2,000 tons more, you need to get approval for that. I'll show you in a bit where that will happen. But yeah, you need to make sure that you get those 2,000. So it's very wise to think about what you want to fill in here. Personally, I would just try to make sure that the estimations are spot on. Dubrink's platform actually can help you with these estimations, but I will not go into detail with respect to that. Let's go further. So we filled in the quantity of goods. Then we also have to mention the value of the good. And we have to estimate it for the next calendar year. Another question they ask is like, so where did you import it last year? And where did you import it this year? The example, they seem to import via Belgium. Last year, however, they did it via hub in France. And this year, that is via Germany. Now, the next step is that they ask for a tax authority certification. And the tax authority document is actually a document where applicants must provide proof of registration with their national tax authority as part of the application to become a CBAM authorized declarant. This may include, for example, a recent VAT registration certificate or an official document confirming the company's tax residence issued by the relevant tax authority. The last one is a declaration of honor. Well, you can read what it means. It actually means that what you're doing is correct, but also that you have not been involved in any serious or repeated infringements of customs legislation, taxation rules, market abuse rules, etc., etc., etc. And you can attach even documents here. That is where Dubrink has an interesting file, which I will show you in a little bit, which actually covers a lot of the declarations you would like to make. Last but not least, we go to the financial and operational details. And the first question, what they ask is, are you AO? Do you have an AEO status? And what we see is that if you are not having an AEO status, it is a little bit harder to become an authorized declarant, and you have to provide a little bit more information. You have to mention what is your legal status, the number of persons dedicated to CBAM reporting and controls for the organization. And personally, I believe that it is even handy to literally explain how you manage CBAM within your organization. I'll show you in a few slides why that is a good thing to do. Note that if your company is less than 2 years old, you will, at least it looks like, you will automatically be seen as high risk, where you will have to provide guarantees, meaning that you have to guarantee that you can pay the costs for the CBAM certificates. Then below you see financial figures. This is already a little bit changed in the portal, but the more proof you show that you are a solid company, that you're not making huge losses, for example, the less risky they see your company. Well, the authorities, they may ask on one hand for proof of reliability. The European Commission wants to assure that you can prove, let's say, an impeccable legal integrity, as they say. You can do that by demonstrating that you have policies in place to prevent doing business with sanctioned parties or becoming involved in customs fraud or irregularities. Think of training and awareness. code of conduct, sanction policy, fraud, incident procedure, etc., etc. Next is financial soundness. So recent financial statements, a bank reference letter or credit rating may be requested. Documentation related to financial guarantees, bank guarantees, surety bond, cash deposit, etc. All this influences what your status is going to be. Last but not least, your internal procedures for compliance and customs legislations, especially if you don't have an AEO status, because if you have that AEO status, most of these things are already taken care of. So one of them is, for example, the technical capacity to comply. I mean, we literally see sometimes that companies are usually manually dealing with a few imports, and they have to enter manually a few rows into the CBAM portal of the European Union. And then suddenly it's 5,000 of them or 20,000, and they have a hard time compiling all that data. But you can imagine if you would work with a company, for example, like Dubrink, you can literally prove that you're doing your calculations right. You can literally prove that you check all your items on CBAM, because in our platform, you could just dump in your imports and automatically it filters for you which items you need to report and you don't have to report. Eventually, that's going to be not only for CBAM EU, but also, for example, for CBAM UK. And if you're interested, if your items are part of CBAM UK, you can go to check.dubrink.com. You will find there a tool, and it will show you now if the items are part of CBAM EU and UK. It's not always the same. For example, if I remember well, under 7.2 codes, it's more extensive in the UK version than in the EU version. Another thing what our platform offers, and what you kind of need to provide to show that you are doing the right internal procedures, is an import summary report. So on every import you do in Dubrink, you have a report with all the information, which shows your supplier, not your sub-suppliers, because suppliers don't always like to show who is their sub-supplier, but with your supplier, with the calculation, with the emission, etc. That if in several years you get an audit, you can pull up your import summary report. Now, to make this whole process even easier, Dubrink created the CBAM Authorized Declarant Self-Assessment and Statement Template. It's a lot of words. And in there, in these 6 pages, you will know step by step what to do and what to state. Of course, you need to make sure first that it is aligned with the reality. But once that's the case, you might want to upload this file to the portal to become an authorized declarant. For example, how you manage the operational capacity, but also how you deal with fraud and sanctions policy statements. I've seen quite some clients of us joining this webinar. For you, this document is totally free of charge. Please reach out to us and we will send it to you. Now, let's continue to the portal. Eventually, they also ask you for financial figures. Again, this is all part of, I believe, the risk assessment. Do you make profit? Do you make loss? What is your turnover? What are your current assets? What are your current liabilities? So another thing what we offer is that if we guide companies through this platform, because sometimes companies want to be held by the hand, we literally have an Excel sheet which you can pre-fill in, so you know that you already have all the answers on the questions they're going to ask in this portal. But again, I hope that via this webinar, you are able to do it by yourself. But if not, we're ready there for you. Then it's submitted. And as you can see here, the status says registered. There are 4 statuses available. The first one is that favorable, means well done. The second one is non-favorable, that means that you unfortunately got declined. The third one is registered, that is this situation, there is no decision taken yet. And the fourth one is withdrawn. If you somehow want to withdraw from registering, you can do so. I personally actually get a lot of questions from companies who say, look, I am under the threshold of 50 tons. However, I might be above the threshold in 2026. What we see is that in many countries, you need to have done your your CBAM registrations in 2025 properly to eventually be allowed in 2026. That is a discussion which we can have with companies. We try to assess the risk, what to do, what not to do. But we actually, as Dubrink, also help with that to file this information for you. But you have to realize that that not providing the proper documentation now in 2025 and ignoring it most likely will have an impact on your ability to become authorized declarant in 2026. Well, if you are importing 1 or 2 tons and you're not working with an indirect representation, then you're fine. Yeah, I hear some sounds. Is there anything?
Yeah, no. We had a few questions come in, but also by raising hands, and I just wrote a message. Please, if you have a question, use the 3 dots or the 9 dots on the right side of your screen. Click on Q&A and just please use the Q&A there because it's a little bit more structured. Otherwise, it will appear in the screen. Sorry,
yeah. We will try to answer them all. No worries. Yeah. So far for that, but it needs a bit of strategy what to do with how many tons you are importing. So here you go by my applications and authorizations. You can see what is your application status and if it's authorized. So in this case, for example, the status is favorable, and yeah, it's active. So you can move forward. This is the one. This is the other. There are also other options in the AMM module. For example, you can amend your status, you can revoke it, you can end even a revocation. Of course, the authorization can be granted. You can ask for a reassessment if data is changing. And for example, there's also the right to appeal. For now, that's not relevant because first you need to make sure that you become registered. An example here, for example, is this an amendment which says increase in the estimated quantity of goods for the current calendar year 5,000 tons to 7,000 tons due to higher than expected demand. Production volumes have been adjusted to meet projected orders. So once you do that, or for example this one, like, hey, there's a new kind of item what we're importing. We would like to amend our authorization. You have to file that as an amendment, and that also means that you need to wait for approval. To me, as an entrepreneur, that felt a bit because the flow will be disrupted. I'm very curious to see how this eventually will evolve. I also am curious to see how fast this will be. But I can imagine that as a company, you are suddenly importing new goods during the year, or you see that your volumes are going up, and you need to wait 120 days before you get an answer. That is not really handy. So I actually expect that the replies will be much faster than the 120 days. But it is something to take into account that if you are providing the amount of CBAM goods you want to import, that if you underestimate it, you will have to eventually ask permission if you want to increase the estimated quantity. Now, the guarantees, there are certain kind of guarantees you have to provide to the authorities if you're importing CBAM goods. These are the ones we identified. On one hand, there's the bank guarantee. It should be issued by a reputable financial institution. One question, let me see. Yeah, and the second one is the surety bond provided by a surety company or insurer. And another option is a cash deposit. It's important to note that the acceptance of these guarantee types may vary depending on national regulations and the discretion of the competent authority. Every one of the guarantees are linked to a reference number, which are used to track and validate the financial guarantee linked to your CBAM obligation. It is good to keep an eye on your local or national authority anyway, because, for example, the starting date on when they will start processing your application to become an authorized declarant varies per country. Many countries, if I'm right, started on the end of March, but in Greece, Romania, Czech Republic, it, for example, only starts on the 1st of July. In the Netherlands, it is begin May, if I remember well. So these things are not always aligned.
May I quickly answer one question, because it's coming up a few times, and I think this would be a good time. So a few people have asked if the 50-ton annual threshold is calculated on a single CN code, or if it's the total of CN codes that fall under CBAM, and it is the last one. So if you have 50 codes or just one, the moment you exceed 50 tons, that's when it starts to count. And yeah, so it's about and the question is if the 50 tons is the sum of the emissions or the overall weight. So this is a mass based threshold, meaning that it's about the net weight of the goods that you are importing. So it's not about the emissions. So it's 50 tons of net weight, which does make it a little bit easier to figure out if you are in scope or not. Because you just look at your customs declaration, you look at the net weight column and there or box, and you would see if it exceeds 50 tons or not.
Thanks. Just to continue on the guarantees, the required guarantee amount is typically based on the following. First of all, the expected volume of imported goods subject to CBAM. So again, it's important what you're going to estimate. The estimated number of CBAM certificates needed, the current market price of CBAM certificates, and the applicant's risk profile as assessed by the competent authority. That is, to me, the most important to keep into account. Like, what is your risk profile going to be? Again, try to provide as much information as you can if you are a solid company and you can handle the potential cost in the future. Now, if we talk about potential cost, and it was for me interesting to see how that fourth question was answered. This is the equation, how we will calculate what the number of certificates are going to be. Just for the sake of it, to make it easier, this one I'll cross out. These are specific emissions already paid under a carbon price. For example, if, let's say, China would have a sound CBAM, then you in the future can deduct those emissions already paid over there from the emissions you import over here. But currently, there's not all the information is known yet on this topic. So what's left is on the left side, the actual specific embedded emissions. That's, for example, the 10 tons CO2 per ton, what the factory is providing you as data. And you can deduct from that a benchmark. And a lot of companies are asking for information. What is the benchmark? But we don't know that yet. That information was given. Could be, for example, the average of the 10 best performing countries, or let's say the cleanest producing countries. It's not known yet. But in this case, we actually estimate it as 2. And then the CBAM factor is it's linked to the ETS system, but you can call it as kind of a discount. So the higher the CBAM factor, the less it lowers the CBAM benchmark. So the more you can deduct from the actual specific embedded emissions. That amount, what you eventually calculate on the right side, you multiply times the goods you're importing, and then you know the number of certificates you are importing. So as an example, let's say you're an importer of aluminium and you import 10,000 tons. The average emission factor from your factories is 10. The benchmark value, again, this is assumption. We don't know the benchmark value yet, is 2. Then we have the CBAM factor, which is next year going to be 0.975. And let's say the CBAM certificate next year is around €80. Calculation will be that you have the 10, which is the emission factor, minus the CBAM benchmark times the CBAM factor. So as you can see, the CBAM factor only has effect on the CBAM benchmark, not on the overall calculation. And then you end up with an emission that you multiply times the tons and times the CBAM certificate. And in this case, they would have to pay around €6.5 million. Now, this is 2026. Let's look at 2030. The CBAM factor is lower, and the estimated CBAM certificate, again, I don't predict the CBAM certificate price, but with more companies who need, if you ask institutions, almost everybody thinks that it's going up in the future from 150 even to around 249 I've seen in 2035. So as you can see, in 5 years, it's not anymore 6.5 million, but it's around 13.5 million euros. So to every ton you're importing, you have to add 1,347 euros. And again, if you look to 2035, it's even more. So when I'm visiting a lot of trade shows and I see importers not looking into CBAM at all, and sidestep, the EU decided that we don't have to buy our certificates in 2026. No, you can buy in the beginning of 2027 your certificates for 2026 with a price which is actually only with a price which is announced in 2027, because that will be an average of the 2026 CBAM certificate price. So what I see is that I come across companies who are placing orders in 2025, imported in 2026, and then suddenly in 2027 they will have a bill to be presented, which they didn't calculate in their cost calculations once they placed the order or once they accepted an order. Therefore, this is something to take into account. If you want to have more information about it, feel free to book a call with us. But yeah, it is just something what we shouldn't ignore. And another thing is that it looks like that the price of CBAM certificates is going to fluctuate, and it will depend on many variables where it will go to. But with less certificates on the market, more companies who need them, there's a chance that the price will go up. There are options to lock in that cost, meaning that you can stabilize your CBAM certificate. I can tell you more about that in a one-to-one meeting, how that can be done. But that means that even if it's 2030, if you make the right decision in 2025, you'll still have the same price as it was in 2025. If you're interested in that, again, feel free to scan this QR code, and we can have a discussion about it, how to do that. We are going to the end. To remember, the EU may take up to 150, even 180 days if you apply before the 15th of June to assess your application. Time it right. The AMM application is independent of your CBAM reporting, so you must be authorized first before you can report. And you first need to get access to the portal. That was actually the first print screen I showed you, where you could choose between customs and carbon border adjustment mechanism, and later decide if you're an employee or an economic operator. That is the first step. The second is the AMM module, and then later you can do your CBAM reporting. Prepare your import forecast, emission data, and any potential financial guarantees in advance. It's important to know what you're going to insert in this platform. With our Dubrink software, we will launch next week a very nice analytics module. It will make it much easier for you. But even if you do it by hand or in your Excel file, make sure that you have the proper forecast, because you don't want suddenly to amend data in the platform where you're an authorized declarant and have to say to the EU, hey guys, I'm gonna import 100 times more. Last but not least, again, requirements can differ by member state. Always check with your national competent authority. So, summary, how can we help? We can automate CBAM for you and provide clever insights. You can leverage our network with consultants all around the world. We really see that for factories, it's so much easier to calculate emissions in just a few clicks in our platform, instead of doing that via the communication template. It will allow you much more to get easier data from your suppliers. We can we have some very good videos which explain them step by step what to do. Sometimes they ask a little bit help from consultants, but especially if they get raw material data from their sub-suppliers, which is, for example, steel mill, and they have an idea what they're doing, they can fill in it themselves, and you will automatically receive the data on your side as an importer. We summarize it for you, and you can report it into the EU portal, and you're done. We can help you with locking in your CBAM cost, and we can also assist you in filing and checking your CBAM authorized declarant information. Again, if you're a member, feel free to request the document where you can declare the most important declarations you have to do. Last but not least, we can help you also via strategic meetings to tackle CBAM, because there is so much more than this. Now we go to the Q&A. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something from it. And yeah, let's see.
Yes, we have quite a few questions.